I never imagined the woman I loved would betray me for money. But then again, life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Her name was Vanessa, and when I first met her, she was the epitome of success. A sharp businesswoman in her early 30s, owning 2 companies, she was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. I was a financial advisor, and we met through mutual friends at a networking event. The moment she walked into the room, all eyes were on her. Long, dark hair, confident strides, and a smile that could disarm anyone. She had the kind of charm that made you believe anything was possible. We hit it off immediately. Conversations flowed like we had known each other for years. It wasn't long before our professional discussions turned personal, and we found ourselves in a whirlwind romance. Vanessa was passionate, driven, and unapologetically ambitious. Her business ventures were flourishing, and I couldn't have been prouder to stand by her side. Our relationship moved fast. Within a year, we had bought a beautiful home together, a modern, sleek house that reflected her sophisticated taste. I thought I was living a dream, but, as they say, dreams have a habit of turning into nightmares. It all started when Vanessa's business took a hit. One of her companies, a marketing firm, had lost a major client. She seemed stressed, but I figured it was normal in her line of work. I did my best to support her, offering financial advice and helping her strategize a plan to recover. She reassured me she had everything under control, but something in her eyes had changed. There was a desperation I hadn't seen before, but I brushed it off, convinced that she would pull through. After all, she always had. Vanessa started spending more time away from home, claiming she had to work late nights at the office to meet new clients. At first, I believed her, even though a small part of me felt uneasy. She would come back with stories of deals and business dinners that lasted into the early hours of the morning. When I asked if she needed help, she brushed me off, telling me I shouldn't worry and that everything was fine. But deep down, I could sense something was off. One night, she came home later than usual. I was already in bed, pretending to sleep when I heard her quietly slip into the room. Her phone vibrated, and she quickly silenced it. I glanced at her and noticed a faint, nervous smile on her face as she looked at the screen. Curiosity gnawed at me, but I forced myself to stay quiet. I didn't want to seem paranoid. A few weeks passed, and the late nights became more frequent. She started locking her phone, which was unusual for her. When I asked about it, she laughed it off, saying she had sensitive business deals she couldn't risk being seen. I tried to trust her. I wanted to trust her, but something inside me was screaming that this wasn't just about work. One evening, after another one of her late-night work meetings, I decided to surprise her at the office. I picked up a bottle of wine, thinking we could share it after her big meeting. As I parked outside her building, my heart raced. I convinced myself I was just being a thoughtful boyfriend. But as I entered the lobby, something strange happened. The receptionist gave me a puzzled look and said, "Vanessa? She left hours ago." I felt my stomach drop. Trying to remain calm, I thanked the receptionist and walked out, my mind racing. Where was she? Why would she lie about being at work? I drove around aimlessly for a while, hoping she would call or text to explain. But she didn't. When I got home, Vanessa was already there, sitting casually on the couch as if nothing had happened. I asked her how her meeting went, testing to see if she would come clean. She smiled and said it went well, that she was close to securing a big deal. I just nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. Something inside me told me to wait, that the truth would reveal itself soon enough. And it did, but not in the way I expected. The next day, while Vanessa was at one of her supposed meetings, I noticed her laptop was left unlocked. It was risky, but I couldn't resist. I opened her emails, half expecting to find nothing, but instead, I found an email thread that shook me to my core. It was from a man named Dominic, someone I had never heard her mention before. The subject line was innocent enough, looking forward to our next meeting, but the content was anything but business. They talked about meeting up at luxury hotels, exchanging lavish gifts, and spending weekends together in places she had never mentioned to me. Dominic wasn't just some business associate. He was someone she had been seeing, someone who was offering her more than just affection. He was offering her money. Lots of money. It wasn't just an affair. It was transactional. And that's when my world began to unravel. After that email, everything changed for me. The suspicion, the doubt, the growing distance between us. It all started to make sense. Vanessa wasn't just cheating on me emotionally. She was selling herself, her time, and apparently, her loyalty, for money. I felt sick. How could I have missed it? I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen, rereading their messages, trying to make sense of it all. In the emails, Dominic wasn't just some random guy. He was wealthy, much wealthier than I had anticipated. The way they spoke, it was clear he had been funding some of her recent ventures, lavish client dinners, expensive outfits, and those work trips she had mentioned. They weren't business meetings. She was meeting him, and he was bankrolling her life. He was her safety net, her plan B for when her business started to falter. I remember closing the laptop, my hands trembling. I didn't know what to do next. My initial reaction was to confront her, demand answers, scream, throw things, anything to release the anger boiling inside me. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was fear. I knew once I opened this door, once I accused her, there would be no going back. Our relationship, our life together, would be over. I didn't sleep that night. Vanessa came home late again, this time with a casual excuse about a last-minute client dinner. She kissed me on the cheek, and I fought the urge to push her away. I lay in bed next to her, feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Every time she moved, I wondered if she was thinking about him. Every time her phone buzzed, I imagined it was another message from Dominic. The next morning, I decided I needed to know more. I couldn't live in this state of half-truths and suspicions. I had to find out just how deep this went. Over the next few days, I started tracking her movements, asking subtle questions about her business, trying to piece together what was real and what was a lie. I felt like a detective in my own life, watching my every step, trying not to tip her off. Then, one evening, while Vanessa was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a message from Dominic. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen, my hands sweating. I knew I shouldn't, but I unlocked her phone anyway. The message was simple: "Miss you, can't wait for our weekend." I felt my stomach churn. They had planned to spend the weekend together. I scrolled further, finding a string of messages between them. He was talking about booking a suite at a 5-star hotel, about buying her jewelry, about how he couldn't wait to spoil her again. And she? She was playing along, thanking him, making plans, all while I sat at home, clueless. That was the moment I broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stormed into the bathroom, phone in hand, my voice shaking as I asked, "Who the hell is Dominic?" Vanessa's face went pale. She stared at me, water still dripping from her hair, frozen in place. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she quickly tried to compose herself. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice wavering. I held up her phone, the message from Dominic still glaring on the screen. Who is he? Don't lie to me." She stepped out of the shower, wrapping a towel around herself. "It's not what you think," she said, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. "He's just a business associate." "A business associate?" I laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call someone you're planning to spend the weekend with in a 5-star hotel? Someone who buys you gifts? Don't lie to me, Vanessa. I've seen the emails. I know everything." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the edge of the bathtub, burying her face in her hands. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "I didn't want to hurt you." I stood there, waiting for her to explain, waiting for her to say something that would make it all make sense. But there was no explanation that could justify what she had done. "I needed the money," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "The business was struggling, and I didn't want to fail. Dominic, he offered to help. It started as business, but it got complicated." Complicated? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You were sleeping with him for money. How is that complicated?" Vanessa looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what else to do. "You have to understand. I was desperate. I thought I could fix everything, that I could keep the business afloat. And he made it easy. He wanted to help." "Help?" I repeated, disgusted. "This wasn't help, Vanessa. This was you selling yourself, Selling us for your business. For money. How could you do this? To me? To us? She tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. I never stopped loving you, she said, her voice breaking. I was just trying to survive. I felt the weight of her words, but they didn't bring any comfort. All I could see was the betrayal, the lies, the deceit. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had turned into someone I didn't recognize. You should have come to me, I said, my voice hollow. We could have figured it out together. But instead, you chose him. You chose money over our relationship. Vanessa sobbed, but I didn't move to comfort her. I couldn't. I was too broken, too angry. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. The days following that confrontation felt like living in a fog. Vanessa had tried to apologize, to explain, but every word that came out of her mouth felt hollow. I wasn't ready to listen. How could I? She had turned our life into a business transaction. Every time I looked at her, all I could think about was Dominic, the money, the lies. It felt like the foundation of everything we had built had crumbled into dust. I started avoiding her. I'd leave the house early and come back late, not because I had anywhere to go, but because I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her. The sight of her, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, as if things were normal, as if nothing had changed, it drove me crazy. We barely spoke. When we did, it was strained, forced, like we were trying to pretend things hadn't fallen apart. Vanessa, to her credit, tried. She cooked dinner most nights, even though I rarely ate it. She would sit across from me at the table, her eyes red from crying, staring at her plate, waiting for me to say something. But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. One evening, after another long, silent dinner, she finally broke the silence. "We need to talk, Jack," she said softly, not looking up from her food. I didn't respond at first, just kept pushing the food around my plate, waiting for her to continue. "I know I've hurt you," she went on, her voice trembling, "but I need you to understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I clenched my jaw, trying to keep calm. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" I repeated, my voice harsher than I intended. "Vanessa, you had a choice. You chose him. You chose money over us." She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "I was desperate, Jack. The business was failing, and I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I didn't want to lose everything." "Everything?" I snapped, slamming my fork down onto the table. "What about us? What about me? Did you even think about what this would do to me?" She wiped her tears, her hands trembling. "I did, but I thought I could keep it separate, that I could fix things and make it all right before you found out." "Well, you didn't," I shot back. "And now, everything is ruined." Vanessa broke down, sobbing into her hands. I wanted to feel sorry for her, to comfort her, but I couldn't. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too raw. I stood up from the table, unable to sit there and watch her cry anymore. "I can't do this," I muttered as I walked out of the room. For the next few weeks, we lived in this unbearable limbo. Vanessa stayed in the house, but it was like living with a stranger. I could feel the weight of her guilt every time I walked into the room. She kept trying to make amends, offering to go to counseling, to do anything to fix what she had broken. But I wasn't ready to let her. I started spending more time away from home. I told myself I needed space, but really, I was running. I'd go to bars after work, meeting up with friends, trying to distract myself from the reality waiting for me at home. One night, after too many drinks, I finally opened up to my best friend, Kyle. We were sitting in a dimly lit pub, the smell of alcohol thick in the air. Kyle had been my rock for years, and I figured if anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was him. "So, how's Vanessa?" he asked cautiously, sensing something was off. I laughed bitterly. "She's been cheating on me, man. For months. With some rich guy who's been bankrolling her business." Kyle stared at me, his beer frozen halfway to his mouth. "What?" "Yeah," I said, taking a long swig of my drink. "I found out a few weeks ago. She's been selling herself to this guy, Dominic, to keep her company afloat." Kyle set his beer down, his face a mix of shock and anger. Jesus, Jack. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Yeah, well, so am I. I sighed, feeling the weight of the confession lift off my shoulders. I don't know what to do, man. I love her, but I can't even look at her right now. Pal shook his head, trying to process everything. Have you talked to her? Like, really talked to her? I've tried, I admitted. But every time I do, I just get so angry. She says she was desperate, that she didn't know what else to do. But that doesn't make it any better. Pal was quiet for a moment, then he leaned forward. Listen, man, you've been through hell. But at some point, you're going to have to decide. Either you try to work through this with her, or you walk away. You can't stay stuck in this limbo forever. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew he was right. I couldn't keep living like this, avoiding her, avoiding the problem. I had to make a decision, one way or another. A few days later, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I was sitting in my car outside our house, staring at the front door. Vanessa was inside, probably waiting for me, probably hoping for another chance to explain, to fix things. But the question was, did I even want to give her that chance? I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Kyle's words echoed in my mind. You either work through it, or you walk away. I got out of the car, my heart pounding in my chest. It was time to face the truth, whatever that might be. Whether I stayed or left, one thing was certain. Our lives would never be the same again. As I opened the door to our house, it felt like I was crossing into enemy territory. The tension between us was a constant presence, heavy and suffocating. Vanessa was sitting on the couch, her legs curled beneath her, looking small and fragile. When she saw me, her eyes flickered with a glimmer of hope, but it faded just as quickly when she saw the look on my face. I couldn't keep running from this. We had to talk, really talk. I can't keep doing this, I said, standing in the doorway. My voice was flat, but inside, a storm was raging. We need to figure out where we go from here. Vanessa nodded slowly, her face pale. I know. I've been thinking about it too, Jack. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I'll go to therapy. We can get counseling. I'll leave the business if I have to. I can't lose you. Her words hung in the air, but instead of soothing me, they sparked something dark inside. I couldn't hold back the anger any longer. I slammed my keys onto the table, the sound echoing through the room. I don't think you get it, Vanessa, I said, my voice rising. This isn't just about fixing things with therapy. You betrayed me. You sold yourself for money. You made me feel like a fool while you were out there with him. How am I supposed to trust you after that? Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't care. My own pain was blinding me. All I could see was the life we had built, crumbling around us. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I'm so sorry. I was scared, Jack. I didn't know how to ask for help. The business was falling apart, and I felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. I didn't want to burden you with my failures. Failures? I scoffed, pacing the room, my hands running through my hair in frustration. So instead of talking to me, your husband, you turned to him? You chose to sleep with him, to take his money, and now you expect me to just, what? Forgive you? I didn't want it to happen, she cried, standing up now, her voice trembling. At first, it was just business. But when things got worse, Dominic offered to help financially. I thought I could control it, that I could keep it separate from us. But I was wrong. Her words were like daggers, each one twisting deeper into the wound. I wanted to scream at her, to make her feel the weight of her choices, but I was exhausted, emotionally drained. All I could manage was a quiet, bitter, "You could have come to me." Vanessa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't want you to see me like that. Weak. I didn't want you to think less of me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Less of you? Vanessa, do you even realize what you've done? You've destroyed us. You've destroyed any chance of trust we had left. She sank back down onto the couch, sobbing quietly into her hands. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her. Almost. But then I remembered the emails, the messages from Dominic, the lavish gifts, the hotel rooms. It was all too much. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said, my voice softer now, but no less resolute. I don't know if I even want to try. The words hung heavy between us. Vanessa wiped her eyes, looking up at me with a desperation I hadn't seen before. Please, Jack. I'll do anything. I know I've messed up, more than I can ever explain. But I still love you. I've never stopped loving you. I stared at her, the woman I had once believed was my forever. The woman who had shared my bed, my dreams, my life. The woman who had turned my love into a commodity, something to be traded for financial security. Could I still love her? Could I still be with her after everything? I don't know what I feel anymore, I admitted, sitting down across from her. My voice was barely above a whisper, but the weight of the admission felt crushing. I don't know if I can ever feel the same way again. Vanessa sniffled, her eyes red and swollen. I'll do whatever it takes, Jack. If you want me to leave the business, I will. I'll cut ties with Dominic. I'll move out if that's what you need. Just don't give up on us. Please. Her words were filled with desperation, but I couldn't help wondering if it was too little, too late. Could we really go back to how things were? Or had the betrayal been too deep, too damaging? I need time, I said finally. I need time to figure out what I want, what I can handle. Right now, I'm too angry, too hurt, to even think clearly. Vanessa nodded, her expression broken. I understand. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'll be here, waiting, if you decide you want to try again. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood up, feeling like the walls of the house were closing in on me. I'm going out for a while, I muttered, grabbing my coat. As I stepped out into the cold night air, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I didn't have to confront her anymore, at least for now. Dread because I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if there was a way to rebuild, or if everything had been destroyed beyond repair. Walking down the quiet streets, I realized something painful. Even if I decided to forgive her, things would never be the same. The trust we had was gone, shattered into pieces too small to put back together. No matter how much time passed, no matter what we did, that shadow of betrayal would always linger. And the hardest part? I wasn't sure if I could live with that. For the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of numbness that settled over me. Everything felt surreal, like I was walking through my life as a stranger, watching myself from the outside. I went through the motions, going to work, coming home, seeing Vanessa move quietly around the house. But none of it felt real anymore. I didn't want to admit it, but part of me was avoiding the decision I knew I had to make. Vanessa had given me space, like I asked. She didn't push, didn't bombard me with apologies or promises anymore. Instead, she just existed in the background, waiting, hoping that somehow I'd come around. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could. The night before it all came crashing down, I found myself sitting in my office at home, staring blankly at the computer screen. I'd been going through our financials, trying to distract myself with numbers, but my mind kept drifting back to her. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had turned to another man when things got hard. It was all still there, gnawing at me, refusing to let go. I thought about all the moments in our relationship that had led us here. The happy memories, the laughter, the nights we'd stayed up late talking about our dreams. And then I thought about how easily all of that had been wiped away, replaced by secrets and deceit. I needed clarity, so I grabbed my coat and went for a walk. The cool night air hit my face, sharp and sobering, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. As I walked through the quiet streets, I found myself wandering toward the park where Vanessa and I had our first date. I hadn't been there in years, but tonight, it felt like the place I needed to be. I sat on the same bench where we had once shared stories and dreams, where we had laughed and kissed, so full of hope for the future. And now, that future felt uncertain, fractured. A part of me wanted to forgive her. I couldn't deny that. There was still love somewhere buried beneath the anger and the hurt. We had built a life together, and letting that go felt like giving up on more than just her. It felt like giving up on myself, on everything we had worked for. But the other part of me, the part that had been bruised and battered by her betrayal, couldn't let go of the anger. I kept replaying everything in my head, how she had hidden things from me, how she had turned to Dominic instead of coming to me when things got tough. That betrayal was like a stain that no amount of apologies could wash away. As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from Kyle. "How you holding up?" I sighed, grateful for the distraction. Kyle had been checking in on me every few days, trying to be supportive without pushing too hard. I hesitated for a moment, then texted back, "Not great. Just thinking about everything. Still don't know what to do." His reply came almost immediately. "You don't have to decide right now, man. But whatever you choose, make sure it's what you really want. Don't stay out of guilt. Don't leave out of anger. Just be sure." I stared at his words for a long time, letting them sink in. He was right. I couldn't make this decision based on anger or guilt. I had to figure out what I wanted, what I could live with. I spent hours in that park, thinking about everything. The love, the betrayal, the future that seemed so uncertain. By the time I finally stood up to leave, I felt more conflicted than ever. When I got home, the house was dark except for a single light in the living room. Vanessa was sitting on the couch, curled up in a blanket, staring blankly at the TV. She looked so small, so vulnerable. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She glanced up when she heard the door, her eyes filled with that same hope and fear that had been there since our confrontation. "Jack," she said softly, "are you okay?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked over to the couch and sat down across from her. For a long moment, we just sat there in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on us. Finally, I spoke. "I've been thinking. A lot." Vanessa nodded, her eyes wide, waiting for the verdict. "I still love you," I admitted, the words heavy on my tongue. "But love isn't enough to fix this. What you did, I can't just forget it." Her face crumpled, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. "I've been asking myself if I can live with what you did, if I can ever trust you again. And the truth is, I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you the same way. I don't know if I can rebuild what's been broken." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't say anything. She just listened, her whole body trembling. "I don't want to make this decision out of anger or guilt," I continued, my voice steadier now. "I want to make it because it's what's right for both of us. And right now, I don't think we can fix this. At least not the way things are." Vanessa's sobs grew louder, and she buried her face in her hands. "Please," she whispered through her tears. "I'll do anything, Jack. I'll leave the business. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't walk away." I felt a lump in my throat, but I forced myself to keep going. "Maybe someday, we can figure this out. Maybe we can rebuild, but I need time. I need space. And I think you do too." She didn't respond. She just cried, her whole body shaking with grief. "I'll move out for a while," I said, standing up. "Give us both time to think, to heal. And maybe we'll find a way back to each other. But for now, this is what I need." Vanessa nodded, unable to speak through her tears. I wanted to comfort her, to hold her and tell her it would be okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. As I walked out of the house that night, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and relief. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had made a choice. It wasn't the end. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something new. A path I would have to walk alone for a while. Only time would tell if it would lead me back to her.